There's a strange thing about places that serve alcohol. They often feel timeless, like they exist outside the rules of the world. The lights are always dim, the clocks never seem to work, and people walk in hoping to lose themselves, maybe just for an hour, maybe forever. But what if the bar forgets how to let you go? There's a bar just outside the city limits. No one really remembers the name. Some called it Joe's, or the Lantern, or just that place off Route 6. It didn't advertise. No website, no social media, no specials on Friday nights. But was always open. Always. And always just barely full. Not crowded, not empty. A comfortable kind of limbo. People found it when they needed to disappear. Travelers. Runaways. People chasing something they couldn't name. That's how Darren ended up there. He wasn't running from anything dramatic. Just a string of bad days, a breakup that left him hollow, and a job that no longer meant anything. He'd taken a wrong exit on purpose. Just a drive. Clear his head. That's when he saw the faint red neon through the trees. Open. The parking lot was more gravel than asphalt. A few other cars. An old jukebox playing something slow and static-laced inside. He walked in expecting a dive. What he got was something different. The bar was long, carved from some dark, glistening wood that didn't look like it should be in a place like this. There were no TVs, no sports memorabilia, just oil paintings on the walls, faces of people mid-scream or mid-laughter. Hard to tell. The bartender looked like someone out of a black and white movie. Slicked hair, polished vest, eyes that didn't blink enough. "You look thirsty," he said. "What'll it be?" Darren ordered whiskey. It tasted better than any drink he'd ever had. And he'd had a lot. He didn't check the time. The windows were black, either from tint or because it was already night. Probably night. But hadn't it just been afternoon? He chatted with a few other patrons. None of them gave names. One man wore a trench coat, even though it was August. A woman with long hair never looked up from her drink. They all smiled, but the kind of smile that says don't ask questions. At one point, Darren reached for his phone. No signal, just a blinking time, 2:13 a.m. But when he put it down and picked it up again, it still said 2:13. He tried asking the bartender when last call was. The man just laughed. "There's no last call here. You leave when you're ready." That line settled into his bones like ice. Because the door, it wasn't there anymore. The front door he'd walked through had vanished. In its place was just wall. Wood. Seamless. Like it had never been a door at all. He told himself it was the drink. That he was just buzzed. He even laughed nervously. But no one else did. The jukebox kept playing. Then the power flickered, but only for a second. And in that second, all the paintings changed. The people in them weren't frozen anymore. They were staring, all of them, at him. When the lights steadied, everything was normal again. But that was the moment Darren realized he wasn't leaving. Not yet. Hours passed. Or minutes. Hard to say. Time felt like it had drowned. He tried talking to the patrons again. They all repeated the same thing, as if reading from a script. "You leave when you're ready." He started to panic, slamming his glass on the bar, demanding to be let out. The bartender simply refilled his drink. "Most folks calm down after a while," he said. "You're still adjusting." To what? To the in-between. And that's when it clicked. This bar wasn't a bar. It was a waiting room. But for what? Darren wasn't sure. Death? Purgatory? Madness? Or maybe it was something worse. A place built from the collective need to escape. A trap set by people who never wanted to be found. A psychic echo of regret and loneliness, solidified into wood and liquor and endless night. Darren sat back down. He sipped his drink and realized something else. He couldn't remember what he'd been running from. The pain was gone. The anger. Even the face of the person he loved gone. Like it had been wiped clean. That's the trick of this place. It doesn't hold you hostage. It makes you forget why you ever wanted to leave. If you ever find yourself on an unfamiliar road and you see a faint red neon sign blinking in the trees, keep driving. Because the scariest bar isn't the one with flickering lights or bloodstained floors. It's the one that makes you forget you ever had somewhere else to be. There's a bar on the outskirts of town called the Hollow Tap, a narrow, brick-walled watering hole tucked between a pawn shop and a shuttered flower store. Not many people go there anymore, but the regulars, the ones who still do, they know about the booth. It sits at the very back, tucked into a shadowy corner under a flickering wall sconce that always seems one heartbeat away from burning out. Red leather, peeling at the edges. The air around it feels off, colder, thicker, like time moves slower there. The staff never see anyone in it. They don't clean it. They don't acknowledge it unless they absolutely have to. And if you ask about the man who always sits there, they'll either pretend not to hear you or change the subject entirely. But I didn't know any of that when I first came in. It was raining, and I was new in town. I just finished a long shift at the hospital and wanted somewhere quiet. Somewhere dim and forgettable. The hollow tap looked like it hadn't changed in 50 years. Exactly what I needed. I ordered a beer and slid into the back booth, not realizing I'd chosen that one. Across from me sat a man. Pale, middle-aged, wearing a charcoal gray suit that looked like it belonged to another decade. His hair was neatly parted, hands folded on the table. He didn't acknowledge me, just stared ahead, eyes glassy, unblinking. I thought maybe he was homeless or on something. I asked if he was okay. He didn't respond. After a minute, I got uncomfortable and stood up to move. But as I turned away, I heard something that made me stop cold. A whisper, not from across the table, but from inside my own head. You sat down. That means you're staying. I turned back. The booth was empty. I blinked. Once. Twice. No man. No trace of him. Just my half-finished beer. I asked the bartender if someone had just been sitting with me. He frowned like I just asked if the sky was purple. You sat in the corner booth? Yeah, for like a minute. There was a guy there. No one's supposed to sit there. Ever. He came around the bar and checked it himself, like he didn't believe me. When he saw it was empty, he made a weird gesture, like a cross, but slower, and muttered something under his breath. You need to leave, he said. Right now. Don't look back. He didn't have to tell me twice. But as I stepped outside, something nagged at me. A feeling in my spine, like I'd left part of myself inside. That night, I had dreams. Vivid ones. I was sitting in that booth again, only the bar was silent. No music, no lights, no staff, just me and the man. Only this time, he looked directly at me. You sat down, he whispered, voice echoing like it was coming through water. That means you're staying. When I woke up, my fingernails were dirty. My clothes smelled like old smoke and mildew. And there was a coaster in my coat pocket, one I didn't remember taking, from the hollow tap. It had a single word scribbled on it in smeared red ink. Stay. Over the next few days, things got worse. Whenever I closed my eyes, even just to blink, I saw flashes of that booth. The red leather, the flickering light, the man's pale hands. At work, I began zoning out, only to snap back and find myself muttering under my breath, repeating a single phrase I couldn't remember learning. You sat down. That means you're staying. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. I tried telling myself it was stress, trauma. I even went back to the bar to try and make sense of it. But when I got there, the hollow tap was boarded up. Dust-covered windows. Padlock on the door. I checked online. There was no listing for it. No address. No photos. Just an archived article from 12 years ago. Local bar shut down after multiple disappearances. Last patron vanished from corner booth. The image was grainy, black and white. But the booth was unmistakable. And in the far back, barely visible, was a man in a suit. The caption read, "Security footage shows empty bar taken just after midnight. Investigators believe no one was present, but someone was. I don't go out much anymore. I can't. Something followed me. I see the man in reflections now. In bus windows. In puddles. He never moves. Just waits. Some nights, I wake up and I'm not in my bed. I'm in the booth. Even though it's gone. Even though I never go back. I always wake up there. Same light. Same silence. Same man across from me. Whispering the same line over and over. You sat down. That means you're staying. They say some places are cursed by tragedy. But I think this is something worse. I think that booth was never part of the bar. I think the bar was part of it. A feeding place. A trap. And I think when you sit down in that booth, you're not just sharing a table. You're sharing a soul. And once you do, something ancient, something patient, marks you. Because in places like that, staying isn't a choice. It's a sentence. It started the same way it always did. a key turning in the lock, the hollow thud of old boots on a warped wooden floor, the bitter scent of stale beer lingering in the air long after the last patron had gone. For 3 years, Eli had worked the midnight shift at the Clover Tap Room, a hole-in-the-wall bar wedged between a laundromat and a boarded-up bookstore, the kind of place you only found if you weren't looking for it. The midnight shift was quiet, too quiet. Most nights, no one came in after 11. But management insisted the bar stay open until 2, just in case. Eli didn't argue. He needed the money. And, besides, something about the silence felt comforting. At first, it was a Tuesday night when he first noticed it. The shift began like always. Unlock the doors, sweep the floor, restock the bottles, wipe down the counter. The usual. Only this time, when he turned around from the sink, one of the bar stools had been pulled out. He was sure he hadn't touched it. He pushed it back in, figured it was just his imagination. But the next night, it happened again. This time, 2 stools pulled out and slightly angled, like someone had just gotten up and stepped away. He checked the cameras. Nothing. Static. Always static between midnight and 2. It had never been a problem before. Management said the system was old and not worth fixing. The next few nights, more things started to happen. Barely perceptible at first. A single ice cube in a glass he didn't remember placing. A drink poured. Neat, no ice, sitting at the far end of the bar. A cold ring of condensation where no glass had been. He started keeping the lights brighter, leaving music on low in the background to kill the silence. But it didn't help. One night, he brought a friend, Kara, to hang out during the shift. Someone to talk to. Someone to prove he wasn't losing his mind. She laughed at first, teased him about being spooked in an empty bar. Then the jukebox turned on by itself. An old song, something neither of them recognized. Kara checked her phone. It had no signal. Then the power surged. The lights dimmed to a flickering orange glow. For a moment, the bar looked different. The tables weren't where they should be. The walls seemed darker, grimier. The mirror behind the bar was cracked, the crack crawling like a vein from corner to corner. And in that mirror, they saw figures. Dozens of them. Seated. Still. Silent. None of them in the bar itself. Just in the reflection. Kara ran. Eli stayed. He told himself he needed to know. That if he left, he'd never sleep again. They would chase him. Whatever it was. So he stayed. And at exactly 1:13 a.m., the front door creaked open. A man stepped in. Thin, pale. Wearing a hat from another era. His face was long, sunken, but not unnatural. Just wrong. Like someone's memory of a man, rather than a real one. He sat at the same stool as always. The one that was always pulled out. Eli couldn't move. The man looked up and said, "You're late." Eli didn't answer. The man reached into his coat and placed something on the bar. A pocket watch. Old. Tarnished. Still ticking. Then he said, "It's your turn now." Eli blinked. The man was gone. But the pocket watch remained, and it was ticking backward. Since that night, the bar has never had another employee make it past 3 weeks on the midnight shift. They always leave, always disappear. Management doesn't ask questions, doesn't replace the cameras, doesn't update the schedule. The Clover Tap Room stays open until 2 a.m. Always, even when no one's left to lock the doors. Most bars have regulars. People whose names aren't remembered, but whose presence becomes part of the furniture, like the creak of an old bar stool or the flicker of a faulty neon sign. At the Hollow Pine, an aging bar tucked between forgotten alleys on the east side of town, one such regular always sat at the far left corner of the counter. Same seat, same posture, same silence. He never ordered. A glass of dark liquor, something too red to be whiskey, too thick to be wine, always waited for him. No one ever saw it poured. He never spoke, never reacted, just watched, not with interest, but with quiet possession. Like everything that happened around him already belonged to him. Locals called him Jack. No one remembered when he first started coming. He just was. At some point, people stopped trying to interact with him. Not out of fear, but because it felt wrong, like talking during a funeral. But things changed the night Carter started his shift. Carter was new. College dropout. Needed cash. Figure bartending would be easier than stocking shelves or pretending to smile in retail. He was wrong. There was something about the place, dimmer than it should have been. Always smelled faintly of burnt sage and wet wood, even after cleaning. The jukebox played songs no one remembered adding, slow jazz warped by static. But Jack unnerved him the most. "What's his deal?" Carter asked his manager, Vic, on his third shift. Vic just shrugged. "He's always here. Doesn't bother anyone. Just don't look at him too long." It was a strange warning, but Carter noticed something odd the following week. Jack had no reflection. He first noticed it while cleaning glasses. The bar had a mirror behind it, the kind that spanned the entire wall. Reflected everyone except Jack. His stool showed up. So did the faint outline of the drink. But where Jack should have been, nothing. Just a void, like a burn mark on film. He thought it was a trick of the light, but it wasn't. He stared longer, and then Jack turned his head, just slightly, toward him. That was the only time Carter saw him move. He looked away instantly, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed, "Don't acknowledge it." The mirror behind the bar cracked the next day. Vic replaced it, but the new one cracked too. Right in the same place where Jack sat. The bar's regulars pretended not to notice. One even muttered, "It's just the building settling." But Carter couldn't stop thinking about the lack of reflection. He started watching Jack more closely, noticing things he wished he hadn't. Jack never blinked. The drink never got lower. And, most disturbingly, he was always already there. Even when Carter opened the bar early, Jack was already sitting there, hands folded neatly in front of him, drink waiting. Like he'd never left. On his 5th week, Carter tried to test something. He moved Jack's glass while cleaning the bar. Just nudged an inch. The next morning, he woke up with a deep cut across his palm. No broken glass. No sign of anything in his apartment. Just the wound. As though something had corrected him. He didn't touch the glass again. He stopped asking questions. Avoided the corner. Refused to glance at the mirror. Until one night, after close, when the storm hit. The wind howled loud enough to drown the music. Power flickered. Everyone cleared out early. Everyone except Jack. Carter wanted to leave. But protocol said no one could lock up until the last customer left. Vic was out sick. It was just him and whatever Jack was. He decided to do what no one else had. He approached. "Sir," he said, trying to sound firm, "we're closing." Jack didn't move. Didn't blink. Carter stood in front of him. The air felt thick. Charged. "Do you need help getting home?" Still nothing. Then Jack did something new. He smiled. Just a fraction. A pull of the lips. But it was enough. And for the first time, he spoke. "Home." His voice was dry. Hollow. Like a forgotten attic. "I never left." Carter stepped back. Jack's head tilted, the smile growing wider. Not friendly. Not amused. Just wrong. And then Carter saw it. Behind Jack, in the bar mirror, something was reflected. Not Jack, but a thing. Tall. Faceless. Wearing the suggestion of clothes. Eyes like ash pits. It mimicked Jack's movements. Tilted its head when Jack did. But it wasn't him. It was what wore him. Carter ran. Didn't clock out. Didn't lock up. He never returned to the hollow pine. But weeks later, he passed it, drawn by something he didn't understand. The bar was still open. He peeked through the window. There, in the far left corner, sat Jack. Same seat. Same drink. Same silence. But now, there was someone behind the bar. A new face. And as Carter watched, the bartender turned and stared directly at him. Just like Jack had. Expressionless. Still, just watching. I don't usually stay out late anymore. Age, anxiety, and the quiet comfort of routine have made me the kind of person who's usually in bed before midnight. But last Friday, an old friend from college was passing through town. We hadn't seen each other in over 10 years, and he insisted we grab a drink at this place he found on some local blog. "You'll love it," he said. "Real character." It was called Jackknife Joe's, tucked between two boarded-up storefronts on a street that seemed to repel light. No sign, no music leaking through the door. Just the thrum of old neon barely hanging in the window, flickering like a dying insect. The inside was even worse. Thick cigarette haze, warped wood floors, a jukebox that only played 80s soft rock, and a bartender who looked like he hadn't blinked since the 90s. I didn't love it, but I stayed. We drank. We laughed. We talked about people we'd forgotten we knew. He left around midnight, his Uber headlights disappearing into the fog. I stayed behind to settle the tab. That's when I noticed him. A man sitting 3 stools down. Pale skin. Thin, nearly translucent. He wasn't drinking, just staring. His eyes were fixed directly ahead. Not at the bar, not at the bartender, but at me. I smiled politely. He didn't blink. I chalked it up to booze and fatigue, threw some bills on the bar, and left. The air outside was cold. Sharp. It sobered me quickly. As I walked the 4 blocks back to my apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I didn't hear footsteps. No cars. No voices. Just a heavy presence behind me. You know that primal instinct when something inside you screams, "Don't turn around"? That was me. Every window I passed had its blinds drawn. Every street lamp seemed to buzz a little louder as I approached. The night felt inflated. Unreal. I made it home, locked the door, and double-checked every window. I even left the hallway light on. Still, I couldn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I heard a noise. Not a crash. Not a creak. Just something subtle. A shuffle, like fabric dragging along hardwood. I got up and checked every room. Nothing. But in the kitchen, something fell off. The faucet was dripping. That wouldn't be strange, except I don't have a leaky faucet. I never have. And when I turned the handle to stop it, the water didn't change. It kept dripping. Same rhythm. Same sound. As if the pipe wanted to keep bleeding. I backed out of the room, heart thudding, and told myself I'd call maintenance in the morning. But then, at 3:17 a.m., the lights flickered, and something whispered my name. Not from inside the apartment, but from behind the door. The front door. It wasn't loud, just barely audible. A breath pressed against the keyhole. A whisper that sounded like it came from a throat filled with soil. I stood frozen in the hallway, and for a moment, I didn't move. But the door handle began to twitch, slowly, like someone was trying to remember how to use it. Not jiggle it, just test it. With calm, mechanical curiosity. I didn't breathe, didn't blink, and then it stopped. I waited until sunrise to sleep. When I checked the hallway camera later that day, the footage had glitched. 2 full hours were missing. Just a jump cut from 2:58 a.m. to 5:01 a.m. I called the landlord. He said it happens sometimes when the power flickers. I told myself it was all just in my head. But things got worse. Every night for the next week, I heard it. The dragging sound, the whisper, the breath on the other side of the door. But now it wasn't just at the door. It started moving, through the walls. At first, I thought it was rats, or the pipes. But then I saw the marks. Faint handprints on the shower mirror. Long, smudged finger streaks on my bedroom window, 10 stories up. My phone screen cracked while sitting untouched on the counter. My microwave turned itself on at 4 a.m., cooking nothing but darkness. And the dreams, they weren't dreams. Not really. I wasn't asleep. I was caught in that in-between place. And I'd see it, standing in the corner of the room. Its shape wrong, shoulders too high, head tilted too far, limbs too long to be human. It never moved, just stared, always staring. I finally went back to Jackknife Joe's. I thought maybe if I retraced my steps, I could break whatever had followed me. But the bar was gone. Not closed. Gone. Where it had been was now a burned-out shell. Caution tape. Scorch beams. A fire had gutted the place 2 years ago. No survivors. I checked online. Nothing. No record of it reopening. No mentions of a bartender. Or a man with pale skin sitting 3 stools down. So what was the bar I went to? Where did I go that night? And whatever it was, how did it know my name? There was a bar tucked at the end of a narrow, dimly lit alley downtown. No sign, no name, just a single red light above the door that buzzed faintly, like it was dying but couldn't quite give in. People didn't talk about it, but every once in a while, usually after midnight, someone would find it. Most of them didn't remember how. Ben was a bartender, had been for years, worked in all kinds of places, sports bars, hotel lounges, even a high-end rooftop joint. He was good at what he did. Fast hands, sharp memory, and a quiet way of making people talk. But after a layoff and a string of bad luck, Ben was desperate. That's when he saw the flyer. It was taped to the inside of a bus stop glass at 2:17 a.m. Night bartender wanted. No experience necessary. Discretion required. No phone number. Just an address. He thought it was a joke, but something about it gnawed at him. The next night, he followed the address. Through winding streets, through parts of town that felt a little too quiet. The kind of quiet that builds pressure behind your ears. That makes you whisper without realizing it. And then there it was. The red light above the door. He stepped inside. It looked normal at first. Dim lights, dusty shelves, vintage wallpaper peeling at the edges. A jukebox played soft jazz from nowhere. The bar smelled like old wood and something faintly metallic, like a penny pressed against your tongue. Behind the counter stood a man in a black vest and white shirt. Neat, pale, eyes too light to be called blue. "You're early," he said, then handed Ben a single brass key. "You start now. They'll be arriving soon. No paperwork, no training, just the key and a nod toward the back room." That first night was quiet. One customer came in, dressed in a funeral suit, hands shaking. Asked for a drink Ben had never heard of, something called the Hollow Wake. Ben hesitated, but his hands moved on their own. Found the ingredients on a shelf that hadn't been there seconds before. Mixed it perfectly. The men drank, cried, then left. The next night, 3 more came. All pale, all quiet, all asking for drinks Ben didn't know, but somehow could make. And every night, the same pattern. They didn't talk to each other, only to Ben. They confessed things, regrets, secrets. Some stories didn't make sense, like they'd skipped time. One woman whispered, "I tried to turn the wheel, I really did," over and over, as if it explained something. Another kept asking if his dog had forgiven him. Ben never asked questions, just listened. One night, he noticed something strange. No matter what the drink was, they all left the same way. They didn't open the door. They just walked toward it and vanished before they reached the threshold, like they were never really there. The regular world began to blur for Ben. He stopped going out during the day. Stopped calling friends. His phone stopped ringing anyway. One night, he tried to take a photo of the bar to send to a friend. But in the photo, the room was empty. No bottles. No lights. Just a hollow, dark room with a broken floor. The only thing visible was himself, staring straight ahead, not holding the phone, not blinking. Another night, he looked into the old mirror behind the bar. Saw someone sitting at a stool that was definitely empty. The man had a split across his forehead, bloodless but deep. His head lolled slightly like it was too heavy. When Ben turned to confront him, there was no one there. But in the mirror, the man smiled. Ben tried to quit. Really tried. He didn't show up one night. Stayed home. Boarded up his windows. Left his phone in the sink filled with water. At 2:17 a.m., he heard the clink of a glass. In his kitchen. The next night, he was back behind the bar. No one asked why. Eventually, Ben stopped aging. His stubble never grew. His nails never needed trimming. His eyes lost color. The bar accepted him, the way a cave accepts a dropped stone. Then came a night he served someone who looked like himself. Same face, same eyes, same hesitant, trembling hands. This version of Ben was wearing the uniform, the vest, the pale shirt, but he sat on the other side of the bar, and he looked afraid. Ben poured the drink before the man could ask. "The Hollow Wake," he said. The other Ben took it, sipped, and whispered, "It's my turn, isn't it?" Ben nodded. He didn't know why, but it felt right. The mirror behind the bar rippled, like something beneath glass had sighed. And the man, Ben, the other Ben, stood, gave a small nod, and walked toward the door. He didn't vanish. He opened it and stepped out into light. For the first time in years, Ben felt warmth. Not on his skin, but beneath it. And then, quietly, the door closed. And Ben turned back to the bar. There were new bottles on the shelves, new names written in dust. And from the corner of the room, the jukebox hummed softly, waiting. They told Chloe the back room was always locked. Not for security, not because of valuables, but because it's just better that way. She had just started working at the Gallow Glass, a Gothic bar tucked into the edge of a decaying warehouse district. The kind of place where patrons wore black on instinct, and where the air always smelled faintly of mildew and old perfume. From the moment Chloe took the job, she noticed the door. It was matte black, unlike the warm cherry wood everywhere else. No label, no signage, just a deadbolt always locked. But what unsettled her most wasn't the door itself. It was the way the other staff never looked at it. They averted their gaze like it hurt to see it. She tried to ask once, during a lull in the shift, "What's in the back room?" Maya, the manager, didn't answer right away. She just poured herself a shot and downed it without a word. Then she said, "The bar's older than you think. Some rooms remember things." The words felt rehearsed, like something passed down, not understood. Chloe let it go for a while. A few weeks in, the shifts started blending together. Same people, same music, same arguments. A cycle of intoxicated repetition. But then came the whispers. They started faintly, always after 2 a.m. when the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed. Soft voices, barely perceptible under the hum of the fridge or the echo of an empty glass. But they didn't sound like conversations. They sounded like mimicry, as if something was practicing the rhythm of speech, not the content. Chloe began sleeping less, not because of fear, yet, but because she couldn't stop thinking about that room, about what she'd heard, or thought she'd heard. Then came the night of the storm. The power flickered once, then died. A moment later, the generator kicked in, humming like a faraway engine. The lights returned, but dimmer, shakier. The music never came back. Everyone cleared out except Chloe and Ezra, the dishwasher. And the whispers came back, louder this time. Ezra paused, sponge in hand. "Did you hear that?" They both turned to the back room. It was open, just slightly, just enough to see the edge of darkness. Neither of them had a key. Ezra refused to go near it, said he'd seen enough weird stuff to know better. Chloe, irrationally emboldened, stepped closer. Inside was a hallway, longer than the building should allow. Narrow, too, with walls that pulsed faintly like they were breathing. The air was thick, metallic. The door slammed shut behind her. No matter how far she walked, the hallway didn't end. But she started to hear something new. Not whispers, echoes. Her voice. But not from her. They came in fragments. "Don't go in there. Why did you open it? You let it out." Each phrase sounded like her, but warped, off-key, like her voice had been recorded on decaying tape. She turned, expecting the door to be behind her, but it wasn't. Only more hallway. Then, ahead, movement. A figure stepped into view. Same height, same build, same clothes. It was her, but not quite. The copy's eyes were vacant, lips slightly parted like it was still learning to breathe. It stared, then opened its mouth, and spoke her thoughts. "They don't know you're down here. They won't look for you. You'll end here." Chloe ran, or tried to, but every direction turned into the same hallway. And the whispers followed, getting bolder, starting to overlap. Hundreds of voices, all hers. She screamed, and they screamed with her, echoing into one monstrous note of recognition. She wasn't alone, and she never had been. That room didn't trap her. It mirrored her. Every version of her that could have existed. Every choice, every silence, every lie was already here. She'd fed them, all of them. Every time she ignored the door. Every time she wondered. Every time she let the idea in. They were made of echoes. And now so was she. The next morning, Ezra quit. He said he waited for Chloe until dawn, but she never came out. Management didn't act surprised. She went into the back room, was all Maya said, before locking the door again. No one looked directly at it. And late at night, if you stay long enough at the gallows glass, you might hear it. A voice from behind the matte black door, calling your name, but not quite in your voice. They called him Perry. No last name, no ID, just Perry. He wasn't loud, wasn't particularly memorable, either, at least not at first glance. But if you asked any bartender who had ever worked at Callahan's Tavern in Dyersville, Iowa, they'd tell you the same thing. Perry came in every Friday at 7:05 p.m. sharp, sat on the third stool from the right, and ordered the same drink, a gin and tonic with a twist of lime. Every week, without fail, for over 3 decades. No one ever saw him arrive. No one ever saw him leave. He'd be there, like he was always meant to be. At first, people assumed he was just a local fixture. Small towns have those quiet types who exist on the fringe of things. You recognize their face, but realize you know nothing about them. That was Perry. But as time went on, things started to feel off. New bartenders would come and go, but they'd all be warned, don't forget Perry's order. Don't speak to him unless he speaks to you. And never, ever sit on his stool. One bartender, Amanda, fresh out of college and full of skepticism, thought the whole thing was a local hazing ritual. So on her second week, when Perry hadn't shown by 7:10, she made show of it, sat on the third stool, poured herself a drink, laughed with a customer. The lights flickered. The jukebox glitched, started playing static instead of music. The air changed like something shifted in the walls. Then, in the mirror behind the bar, Amanda saw something she still refuses to describe. Only that it was watching her from the reflection, but not visible in the real room. She left before closing, never returned. It wasn't just Amanda. The bar's security cameras were upgraded in 2016. The owner was proud, said they'd finally get a good angle on the regulars for insurance purposes. But that Friday, at 7:05 p.m., the feed in the main bar cut out. Just static. When it returned 22 minutes later, there was Perry, drink in hand, sipping calmly. They reviewed the footage dozens of times. Nothing showed him entering. Nothing showed his drink being made. But there he was. Same seat, same expression, same drink. Eventually, people stopped asking questions. But then, something changed. In the winter of 2019, a man came in, new to town. Said his name was Andrew. Said he was doing genealogy research on his grandfather, a man named Perry Harrow, who had vanished in 1986 without a trace. Left behind a wife and a baby boy. The description matched perfectly. Same look, same calm demeanor. Even the gin and tonic, his grandfather's favorite, Andrew claimed. But that couldn't be right, because Perry had already been coming to the bar for years before 1986. When Andrew was shown a photo, an old, grainy snapshot one bartender had secretly taken back in the 90s, he went pale. That's him, he whispered, but younger than me. That's when the theories started spreading. Perry wasn't a ghost. He wasn't alive either. He was something else. A loop, a memory carved so deep into the fabric of the bar that it kept playing out. Every week, unchanged, unaging, a fragment of time, refusing to die. But even fragments can fray. Last year, for the first time in over 3 decades, Perry didn't show up. 7:05 came and went. The stool remained empty. The jukebox played normally. The lights stayed steady. No static, no distortion, nothing, just silence. Some thought it meant he'd finally moved on. Others weren't so sure. 2 days later, one of the regulars found a handwritten note tucked under the gin bottle behind the bar. No one admitted to writing it, and it wasn't there the night before. It read, "The drink was never for me. It was to hold the door shut." That same week, the back wall of Callahan's, where the mirror had always hung, cracked straight down the middle. No earthquake, no foundation issues, just a jagged, unnatural break in the center of the glass, like something had pushed from the inside. The mirror was removed, the stool chained off, but the space where Perry used to sit, it feels wrong now. Too cold, too quiet, like the air hasn't moved in weeks. Locals say the bar's vibe changed. Feels heavier. Drinks don't go down as easy. And sometimes, late at night, the old jukebox plays a song no one remembers adding to the playlist. A slow, warped piano track with a single repeated line. The door is open now. Sometimes, horror doesn't come from violence or ghosts. It comes from repetition, from something too familiar being just slightly wrong. Perry wasn't the warning. He was the lock. And now he's gone. It started with a faulty line. Or at least, that's what the owner thought when the bar's beer tap began dispensing liquid that was a little too dark. It had a metallic aftertaste, bitter and sharp. Not the kind that come from a bad keg, but something almost coppery. The bar was called the Hollow Oak, an old speakeasy-style place in a forgotten part of town, surrounded by closed storefronts and dim-lit alleys. It had character, flickering stained glass lamps, scratched wood floors, and a smell that never fully left, no matter how many scented candles were lit. It had been empty for decades before the new owner, Darren, reopened it. He liked to say it was bringing ghosts back to life, though no one laughed when he said it. The bar had history, unsaid, unwritten, but the regulars felt it, like the way the air thickened near the back booth or how the jukebox played songs no one had selected. The first sign came on a Wednesday. Darren was cleaning out the tap system, flushing the lines, when something thick clogged the hose. He expected sediment. What came out looked like jelly. Dark red, almost black. No smell. Just wrong. He tossed it, blaming an old keg. But after that, things changed. Patrons began to mention the beer, taste it off. Some said it was richer, smoother. One man swore it made him feel like he'd stepped back in time, like he could remember childhood smells he'd long forgotten. A woman said it made her dream of people she didn't know. People crying beneath oak trees in pouring rain. The hollow oak got popular fast after that. People didn't come for the decor or the music. They came for the beer, the one that ran from the far left tap. It didn't have a name. Darren tried branding it, but the chalkboard names never stuck. Customers just called it that one, like some collective agreement to not talk too much about it. And Darren noticed something else. The keg hooked to that line. It never emptied. He marked the volume. Track pours. It didn't make sense. He even unhooked the keg once and left the tap open. Liquid still flowed, and not beer. The thick, reddish-black substance ran warm from the metal spout, slow and steady, like it was part of something living. He should have shut it down, called someone, but curiosity is its own kind of thirst. He served it anyway, and people kept drinking. They didn't ask questions. They just came back, again and again. Then the regulars began to change. One man, Jules, stopped blinking. Not metaphorically, literally. Hours would pass, and he wouldn't close his eyes. He claimed he could see things others couldn't. Echoes of people long gone, outlines standing behind the bar mirror. A woman named Ava spoke in reverse when drunk. Full sentences. None of it made sense until someone recorded her and played it backward. It was a prayer, one that begged something beneath the ground not to rise. No one knew where the tap drew from. Darren tried to trace it. The line went into the wall, and from there, it disappeared. Not behind plumbing, not into the floor. Just vanished. He tore the wall open one night in a panic. What he found behind the plaster wasn't a pipe. It was a root, deep brown, vein like muscle, wet to the touch, pulsing faintly, like it was breathing. And the tap, it was buried into it, like a thorn in flesh. The beer wasn't beer. It was being harvested. He shut the bar for 2 nights. But when he returned, someone had already opened it. Candles were lit, glasses cleaned, customers seated in complete silence, sipping slowly from their pints. No one acknowledged him. One man turned and smiled. His teeth were black. His gums were bleeding, but he didn't seem in pain. Just content. Back on tap, the man said. You shouldn't have interrupted it. Darren ran, but the bar never let him leave. When he got outside, the streets were empty. No cars, no noise. The lights above flickered like a dying film reel. He tried to call someone, anyone, but his phone only displayed one word. Tapped. He hasn't been seen since. The hollow oak still stands. Unassuming. Quiet. Sometimes, if you walk by late at night, you'll see the light on behind the bar. The far left tap still running, though no one stands to serve. No smell. No sound. Just that glass filling on its own. The bar was called Linden's, tucked between a pawn shop and a boarded-up bookstore in a forgotten stretch of downtown that seemed to hold its breath after 10 p.m. It didn't advertise. It didn't show up on Google Maps. And yet, every Friday night, without fail, the neon sign in the window lit up in deep crimson letters. Open. That was the strange part. The bar had no electricity. Everyone in the neighborhood knew that. The city shut off its power 3 years ago after the owner disappeared and bills went unpaid. Still, the sign glowed, dimly, unnaturally, pulsing like a heartbeat. Sometimes it flickered. Sometimes it didn't. People talked, of course. Urban legends grew like mold around places like Linden's. Some said it was haunted. Others said it was a front for something worse. But most just ignored it. If the building wanted to pretend it was still alive, let it. Then came Marcus, a building inspector with a chipped tooth and a slow, deliberate way of speaking. He didn't believe in ghosts or cursed real estate. He believed in code violations and black mold. On a gray October morning, Marcus was assigned to evaluate the building for demolition. It was part of a cleanup initiative the city was pushing. Weird history or not, he muttered, glancing at the faint outline of the neon through the dirty glass. This place is done. The power records confirmed it. Zero draw, meter disconnected. Yet there it was. That sign, glowing, redder than blood, humming like a wasp's nest. He tried the door. It opened effortlessly. Inside, the bar was untouched. Dusty, but preserved. Liquor bottles still lined the shelves. Chairs still circled the tables, as if waiting for someone. And the air was wrong. Too still, like it had been vacuum sealed. There was no sound, not even street noise. Marcus turned on his flashlight and made his way behind the bar. He found a fuse box, switched off. No backup generators. No batteries. No signs of recent tampering. He glanced at the glowing red letters through the front window. Open. His brow furrowed. He wrote down what he saw. Took a few photos. Nothing abnormal except the sign. And that could be explained later. Maybe it was leftover charge from years ago. Maybe he was tired. As he prepared to leave, he heard something. A soft knock from the bathroom door. He hadn't checked it yet. Didn't even realize it was closed. He hesitated, then stepped forward, every footstep impossibly loud. The knock came again. This time, faster. Urgent. Hello, he called. No answer. He opened the door slowly. Nothing inside. No windows. Just a rusted sink and a single stall door hanging slightly ajar. And on the mirror, written in condensation, though the air was ice cold, "You're open too." He blinked. Stepped back. The sign outside flickered. And suddenly, the room changed. The bar was full. Not of people, but of something. Shadows moved in unnatural patterns. The air had grown thick, pressing against his skin. A glass clinked at the far end of the counter, though no one was there. The neon sign now pulsed, faster, brighter. Open, open, open. He turned to run, but the door wasn't where it had been. In its place, a brick wall. His flashlight died. Silence. Then the jukebox in the corner lit up and started playing a slow, warbled version of a song he didn't recognize. The kind of song that felt like it was playing inside your skull rather than outside of it. A voice whispered from behind the bar, low and gurgling. "It only glows when someone's here." Marcus screamed, or tried to. The sound caught in his throat. His legs buckled. And then, darkness. They found Marcus the next morning, unconscious in the alley behind Linden's. No bruises, no wounds, just pale, breath shallow, eyes open but unseeing. He was never able to explain what happened. They asked about his report, about the inspection, but all he could say was, "The sign was on. I swear to God it was on." The demolition was delayed. Again, city workers refused to go inside. The contractors said their equipment stopped working when they got close. Phones died. Batteries drained. Tools went missing. One guy claimed he saw someone watching him through the bar's dusty window. Someone with his own face. Eventually, they fenced the building off. Pin a notice on the door. But still on Friday nights, that neon sign glows. Open. Some say Linden's was a speakeasy built over a burned-down church. Others claim it was a spiritual hotspot, a place where the veil was thinner. But maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe it just needs someone inside. And once it gets them, it stays lit. It was just past 1:45 a.m. when Darren noticed the last customer hadn't moved in nearly 30 minutes. The man sat alone at the far end of the bar, his drink untouched. Head slightly tilted, eyes fixed on something past Darren's shoulder, like he was staring at something only he could see. Darren, the night bartender at the Hollow Oak, was used to weirdos. Bars attracted them, especially on weeknights when the regulars were gone and only the lonely or the lost showed up. But this guy wasn't drunk. He wasn't even blinking. "Hey man, we're closing in 15. Darren called over, wiping the counter with a slow, circular motion. No response. He tried again, louder. Still nothing. The bar was nearly empty now. The jukebox had clicked off on its own a half hour ago. The TV above the shelves displayed nothing but static, even though the cable was paid up and working fine earlier. He'd been putting off fixing it all week. Darren stepped out from behind the bar and walked over. As he got closer, a strange pressure hit his ears, like the air had thickened. The hum of the bar lights dulled, and he could hear his own heartbeat over the silence. The man was pale. Not sickly pale, but colorless, like a mannequin that had been painted wrong. "Sir," Darren said, standing a few feet away, "it's time to head out." Finally, the man turned. His mouth opened slightly, then closed, and then, very softly, he asked, "What time is it?" Darren checked his watch. 1:50. The man's expression twisted, regret, or maybe fear. "Too late," he said. Then he stood up and walked toward the back hallway, where the bathrooms and the supply closet were. "Hey," Darren called out, "that's not the exit." But the man was already gone. Turned the corner without looking back. Darren jogged after him. The hallway was empty. Both bathroom doors stood open. The closet locked. No sign of him. Darren checked the back door. It was bolted shut from the inside, same as always. He stood there a moment, trying to rationalize it. Maybe the guy left quickly, quietly. Maybe he'd walked past when Darren looked down. Except Darren hadn't looked down, and the guy's footsteps hadn't made a sound. He returned to the bar. The man's glass was still full, but now something was off. The jukebox had turned back on, playing a song Darren didn't recognize. A scratchy, slowed-down jazz tune that felt wrong, like it was being played underwater. The clock above the register now read 2:03, but Darren could have sworn it had just been 1:51. He felt disoriented, like he'd stood still for too long and the world had moved ahead without him. He reached for his phone. No signal. Not no bars, just no service. Like the network had been wiped out. He stepped outside for air. The street was empty, silent. No cars, no headlights in the distance. The street lamps flickered, out of sync, like they were blinking in code. When he turned to go back inside, the door had locked behind him. But he'd never locked it. Through the window, the bar was still lit. And that man, that same man, was sitting at the far end of the bar again. Same position, same stare. Darren pounded on the glass. No reaction. He pulled his keys out, fumbling with the lock, but the key wouldn't fit. Then the lights inside began to dim. One by one, the neon sign in the window buzzed louder than before. It said open, but the letters began flickering one at a time until it just read, "Open onderstreping steken, onderstreping steken." Then, underscore in, then dark. Darren backed away, looked up. The street signs were gone. No stars, no sound, just a soft, low hum, like the world was holding its breath. He ran down the block, past the bakery, the gas station, and the convenience store. But each storefront was the same. Locked, empty, and wrong. Windows displayed outdated posters. Concerts that never happened, products that hadn't been sold in decades. When he turned the corner onto Main Street, his breath caught in his throat. He was standing in front of the Hollow Oak. Again, but not the same. The sign above the door was faded, the windows boarded. And carved into the wood near the handle was something Darren had never seen before. "Don't stay past closing." He tried the door. This time it opened easily. Inside, the bar was dust-covered, silent. Cobwebs stretched across chairs and bottles. And at the end of the bar, the man sat once more. But now, Darren recognized him. The same jacket, the same face. Only it was his face. Older, haggard, staring ahead at something Darren couldn't see. And behind the bar, a newer bottle sat open. The label read, "Served only after hours." He turned to run, but the door was gone. Just wall, just wood, and the jukebox started again. Now, Darren serves the bar, night after night, pouring drinks for strangers who never finish them. Always watching the clock, always waiting for someone to leave before it's too late. Because closing time doesn't mean what it used to. And if you stay even 1 minute past, you stay forever. They say the bar didn't even have a name. Just a glowing red, open sign flickering in the window, like an invitation no one remembered accepting. It was tucked away in a narrow alley downtown, somewhere between two buildings that shouldn't have had room for anything in between. The kind of place you don't notice unless you're already lost or already looking for something you can't name. Derek had never seen it before that night. He wasn't drunk, just drifting. One of those nights where home felt too quiet, too heavy. The kind of silence that scratches at the inside of your skull. The door creaked when he pushed it open. The air inside was thick, warm, and smelled faintly of vanilla and old records. Jazz played from a dusty speaker in the corner. Something soft, old, like it had been looping for years. There were only 3 other people in the bar. The bartender, hunched and nearly motionless. A man in a booth, fast asleep or dead drunk. And her. She was sitting at the bar alone. A woman in a bright red dress that shimmered under the low amber lights. Her hair was dark, curled like smoke, and she had that kind of presence that makes a room feel colder once you notice it. She didn't look up when Derek sat down, just sipped her drink, something clear in a crystal glass, and traced the rim with one finger. Eventually, she spoke. "You're not from here, are you?" Derek hesitated. "No, just walking." She smiled. Not at him, at something else. Maybe at a memory. They always find their way here. The ones who walk without direction. Her voice was soft. The kind of soft that forces you to listen harder. Every syllable felt dipped in something slow and dangerous. They talked. Or rather, she talked and Derek listened. She told him about her first time there. Said the bar had a way of showing up only when you needed it. But that you couldn't visit twice. Not unless you left something behind. When he asked what she meant, she paused. Her gaze flicked toward the mirror behind the bar. Derek looked too. There was no reflection. No bartender. No woman in red. Just Derek, alone. He turned back, heart hammering, but she was still there. Still sipping her drink. Still smiling that distant, tragic smile. Then she said, "There's a moment when you realize you've crossed into somewhere you're not meant to be." And by then, she stopped. Mid-sentence. Just stopped. Mouth still open, lips forming the beginning of the next word. And then, she was gone. Not dramatically. No smoke, no sound. Just gone. Her glass was still there. Half full. Still cold to the touch. Derek blinked, checked the seat beside him. Empty. He spun toward the bartender. The man looked up slowly and finally spoke. "She does that. Sometimes." Who was she? The bartender shrugged. "Depends who you ask." Derek left the bar without paying. He wasn't charged. He didn't even remember opening the door to leave. But when he turned back to look at the building, it was gone. No red neon sign. No door. Just a brick wall and an overflowing dumpster. Weeks passed. Derek tried to find the bar again. Every alley, every turn. Nothing. Until one night, scrolling mindlessly through old forums and obscure threads about liminal spaces and strange disappearances, he found a post. Dated 2008. A man described a woman in a red dress he met at a bar that shouldn't have existed. She vanished mid-sentence. The next post was from someone in 1996. Then 1983. Always the same story. Always the same woman. Each one convinced they were the only ones who'd seen her. Some say she was cursed to relive her final night forever. Others believe she never existed at all. That she's a projection of the bar itself. A lure for the lost. A whisper from some place that exists just to collect people on the brink of disappearing themselves. But here's the real horror. In every version of the story, she says something different. A different line. A different memory. Except for the end. Every account ends with her saying, "There's a moment when you realize you've crossed into somewhere you're not meant to be." And by then, and then silence. What if she isn't vanishing? What if she's being interrupted? What if the sentence was never meant to finish? And what if, the second you hear those words, you're next? He didn't remember the name, just that it glowed. Not the kind of glow you'd expect from a sign. This was something else. A pulsing violet shimmer, like neon passed through water. It hovered above the entrance like it was breathing. Jeremy had been walking home from another fail date, the kind where silence stretches too long between cheap drinks. It was 2:17 a.m. He was sober, exhausted, and yet, when he passed the alley behind the pawn shop on 5th and Vine, the glow caught his eye. He didn't remember there being a bar there before. It wasn't on Google Maps. No reviews. No social media. Just a wooden door tucked in a brick, the paint peeling as if it had always been there, but forgotten. He hesitated, then entered. It was silent at first. No music, just the quiet thrum of electricity in the air, like the moment before a storm. Then the door shut behind him, and the bar came alive. The lights were dim, flickering candles on every table despite no visible source of fire. A jazz tune played faintly from an old record player in the corner, scratchy and warped, like the vinyl had been spinning for years without pause. The air smelled like rain and something older, dust, whiskey, and lavender. The bartender looked up. A woman, ageless. Her eyes didn't reflect the light. "Wallaby?" she asked. He hesitated. Just a beer, I guess." She poured something dark into a glass. "You can't order what you want here," she said. "Only what you need." The first sip was strange. Not bad, but unfamiliar. Not a flavor. A feeling. A memory. The smell of his grandfather's attic. The warmth of childhood Christmas lights. The hollow echo of a laugh he hadn't heard in years. He blinked. "What is this place?" She wiped the bar with a cloth that never seemed to get wet. "Depends who you ask." Jeremy glanced around. There were others, patrons sitting in shadowed booths. None of them spoke. None of them looked at him. One stirred their drink with a spoon too long. Another sat completely still, staring down into their glass as if afraid to look away. And then, in the back corner, he saw something even stranger. A mirror. Except his reflection wasn't his. It was him, but wrong. Same face. Same clothes. But the eyes were exhausted. The kind of tired you can't sleep off. The reflection looked directly at him, then smiled. Jeremy turned away. "I think I should go," he muttered, standing. The bartender shook her head slowly. "Can't leave yet. Not until last call." He checked his phone. It was 2:18 a.m. No minutes had passed. His phone buzzed once and died. The music shifted, slowed, warped. The jazz began to crackle, a note stretching too long, too low. He looked back toward the other patrons, but they weren't patrons anymore. They were statues, motionless, gray, as if turned to ash. Only the bartender remained, still cleaning, still calm. "What is this place?" he whispered. She looked up. Her face had changed, still human, but paler, empty, like someone had erased the emotion and drawn it back on wrong. "This is where the lost come," she said. "The in-between, the hour the world forgets. The place you go when you slip between moments." He backed away, toward the door. It wouldn't open. He pulled harder. The handle turned, but the door wouldn't budge. It was part of the wall now. "No one ever finds a bar," she said behind him. "It finds you." Jeremy turned. She was right in front of him now. "You walked into a question. You'll leave with an answer." He blinked, and suddenly the bar was gone. He was lying on the sidewalk, outside the pawn shop. The door behind him was just a blank wall. The glow had vanished. His phone buzzed. 3:02 a.m. One new photo in his camera roll. He opened it. It was him behind the bar, wearing the bartender's clothes, smiling that same hollow smile. And in the reflection behind him, the booths were full again.